I'd like to call to order this committee of the whole meeting of the town of Saugeen Shores and extend a welcome to everyone in the chambers this evening. The first order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind every member of your responsibility to do so, and you can do so now or when it arises on the agenda. Undeclared. Then the next item is additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda, and we have nothing under that. We have no delegations. The first item of business will be a report of a municipal officer or committee, a general government staff report to do with refreshment vehicle license for Elgin Main Beach, and our clerk Linda White will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The call for proposals was advertised in January and throughout the month of February for applications to locate refreshment vehicles on municipal property. The submission deadline was March the 1st. One tender was submitted for the Port Elgin Main Beach. Michelin Man submitted a proposal to locate her donut diner food trailer on the south side of the most southerly shed located within the flea market area at the Port Elgin Main Beach. The menu will consist of freshly made mini donuts, coffee, and cold beverages. If approved, a business license will be issued to Ms. Mann to allow commencement of her business on May the 20th through to September the 6th, 2016. The donut diner will be located at this location during the term of the license. Since the donut diner will be located within the flea market area, Ms. Mann has agreed to continue to pay the annual fee to the Port Elgin Tourist Association for her participation in the weekly flea market, as she has done in the past. Ms. Mann will be requested to work with the organizers of the Bruce Power Beach Party and all other special events approved in this location to ensure that their electrical and locational needs can be accommodated. All conditions set out in the business licensing bylaw, including insurance, will apply to this license. The tender submitted is in the amount of $1,100, including hydro, plus a business license fee of $175.
Thank you, Linda. Then the recommendation is that a refreshment vehicle license be approved for Michelle Mann to locate the donut diner at the Port Elgin Main Beach within the area used for the flea market for the 2016 season. Comments, questions? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. And the next item on the agenda is a staff report, and it has to do with surplus lands on Sandy Acres. And again, our clerk, Linda White, will present.
Thank you. Street B on Plan 3M 184 is an unopened road allowance located between two homes located at 263 and 275 Sandy Acres Road. Block 25 on the same plan is a 0.3 meter reserve located at the northeast limit of Street B, as shown on the plan that's attached to the report. Street B was created as a future road linkage leading from Sandy Acres Road to the vacant lands to the north, which is now known as Summerside Place. When Summerside Place was developed, it was determined that the road linkage was not required and residential lots were developed abutting Block 25, thereby creating a dead-end road allowance. Combined, Street B and Block 25 are 20 meters in width and 41 meters in depth, which is a typical residential lot size in this neighborhood. Municipal staff have reviewed the future requirements of the municipality and are of the opinion that this property can be declared surplus to the municipality's needs and sold as a residential lot. The subject land is zoned residential and is serviced with municipal water and sewer. Prior to selling a road allowance, the municipality is required to complete the necessary process to stop up and close the road allowance. If direction is given by council, staff will provide public notice of council's intention to pass a bylaw at a future council meeting to stop up and close the road allowance for the purpose of eventually selling the property. Anyone with an interest or concerns with respect to the road allowance will be provided an opportunity to submit their comments to council prior to passage of the bylaw. Once the road closure bylaw has been approved, council will be in a position to sell the subject lands. A report will be presented at a future meeting recommending the method of selling the land and seeking council's direction regarding the sale price. The cost of giving notice will be recovered in the sale of the land.
Thank you, Linda. The recommendation is that council declare Street B on Block 25, Plan 3M-184, surplus to the municipality's needs, and further that the public notice be given of council's intention to pass a bylaw to stop up and close Street B and Block 25, Plan 3M-184. Questions or comments? Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. White, when that land was acquired, was it acquired under the guise of in lieu of parkland, or was it specifically for street allowance? And in either case, did we pay for it at the time?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the land was acquired through the plan of subdivision stage, and it was not accepted as parkland. It was accepted as a road allowance for future use, if required. No, we did not pay for it.
Further comments? If not, then all in favor. Opposed, if any. That's carried. The next item again is General Government Staff Report, and it has to do with the request for an encroachment on the North Shore Road. And again, our clerk, Linda White, will present.
Thank you. At the April 27, 2015 council meeting, council denied the request for an encroachment agreement from Scott and Janet Roberts, owners of 53 North Shore Road, to allow the installation of a new set of stone steps to be constructed on the road allowance from the subject property to the base of the slope on the North Shore Road. In March 2016, Mr. and Mrs. Roberts resubmitted their request to install the steps on the municipal property in the same location as requested in 2015. There has been no change to the original request. As you may recall, in December 2015, Council amended the encroachment policy, and that policy statement includes, it is the policy of the Town of Saugeen Shores that municipal lands are for municipal purposes and or for the public's use and are to remain free and clear of private encroachments. Mr. and Mrs. Roberts stated in their application, the reason for requesting the agreement is to allow the installation of the steps from the property at 53 Fenton Drive down the slope, which will allow safe access to the slope for the maintenance of town-owned property, which is currently not maintained by the town, and also to allow access to and from North Shore Road from 53 Fenton Drive, as other properties all along North Shore Road currently have. As with previous encroachment requests, staff does not support entering into agreements for non-essential infrastructure. Staff recommends that encroachments on public lands continue to be limited and that the application be denied.
Thank you, Linda. Then the recommendation is that Council continue to limit encroachments on municipal rights of way to preserve public lands, and further that the requests from Scott and Janet Roberts to construct a new encroachment on the North Shore Road allowance be denied. Questions or comments? Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're going around and around again, and I understand that staff has continued with the same approach of saying request denied. And I understand that something happened and people made a mistake, and then we had a long discussion about it, and then we said we ought to be able to allow people to do exactly what they're doing. The landscaping is there. There's a few steps being added to the process, and I truly believe this is a forward-thinking process. It's not a negative thinking process for me. So if I'm going to vote no against this staff report, because I believe it's something that we can allow and we should allow based on advanced notice and discussion, similar to the planning process. But what I'm going to ask you now, Mr. Mayor, is this. If there's sufficient no votes from Council tonight against the staff report, does that mean we can allow this encroachment, or will it have to come back again?
So I guess if this motion fails, then I guess we can allow it. If that's what your question is. They can propose that you allow it, and whatever conditions you would want in a separate motion. But the motion before us now is to deny it. Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll try and keep this brief because I'm losing my voice. With regards to this, I think most people, at least most people around this table, know what my opinion on this. I spoke adamantly in favor of allowing the encroachments to be included in the planning bylaw, but back in December, and with this one and others in mind. I think in this particular case, certainly as Councillor Minaj pointed out, there's been back and forth, mistakes made and disagreements and misunderstandings all along the way. But I think in the instance we're talking about here, And if you compare it to all of the other properties that back onto the North Shore Road, which by all accounts and is promoted in our tourist material as one of the most picturesque drives in Saugeen Shores. We have a new bike trail, and it's a waterfront drive that many people enjoy. And the residents along there, I would say not even in part, I would say in whole, take a lot of pride in keeping their properties maintained and beautified for that purpose. And anybody who's gone along there will know that it's a steep embankment from the level of their yards to the road surface so that they can access the trail, which is right across the road. And I think when we added the changes to the encroachment policy, we did so with the caveats that as long as it did not impede in public works, i.e. the snow plows aren't going to be able to plow, or the grass cutters aren't going to be able to cut, or we're not going to impede with the sight line, so we're not causing a danger or a hazard that doesn't previously exist, then these would be considered. I think this case meets that criteria exactly. There are some 13 or 15 stairways along that stretch of road that people have either added or had been there historically, and people in some cases have rehabilitated old ones that were there. And I think what the Roberts are asking for here is wholly reasonable and wholly consistent with the way the policy is drafted, and also negates some liability off of the town, because that is town property. And if somebody was to try and transgress that hill and fall down and succumb to an injury, we would be in perhaps possibly a greater liability situation than if there was a set of stairs there. So I, like Councillor Minaj, will be voting no on this motion. Thank you.
Start with the Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe just if I just make a bit of a point of order, Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering this, what we have before us is a recommendation which hasn't been moved or seconded by any member, so it's not really before the committee as of yet, and it is awkwardly worded for a resolution if it's refused. Mr. Mayor, I wonder, since it hasn't been placed before the committee, if members wanted to direct staff to negotiate an encroachment agreement with the proponents in this case, couldn't those members simply make a motion now? And this recommendation is not on the floor, so a motion from the members at this moment could be considered if that was the direction the members wish to pursue. Mr. Mayor, I put that to you if that's true.
Well, I think we can take an amendment. I think that normally we don't ask, in committee of the whole, ask for movers or seconders of our recommendations, other than if you wish to amend it. And I think we do that simply, we do it either verbally, if we can all understand it, or we get it written so that it's clear. I would disagree with you. I think I've read the recommendation, and it is before the committee for discussion now. And if there's anybody wishing to amendment, that's one item. But just as we voted on the two previous recommendations, I would suspect that this one is ready to be voted on if it is not an amendment proposed.
No, I certainly don't disagree. I can certainly understand what the Deputy Mayor is saying. If somebody wants to put a motion forward to enter into an encroachment or direct staff to create an encroachment agreement, they're more than willing to do that if that's what the response to Councillor Minaj is. And I'm not sure that's not what he's working on right now. But.
Okay, Councillor Rich. Yeah, okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm thinking about the discussion that we had in the past, and there were two reasons why I didn't vote in favor of the encroachment. One was that our Director of Public Works, Stu Doyle, at that time had said that there was a safety issue and that they had not been in favor of putting any more stairwells down to that area, and I'd like to pose that to Len if he would be in agreement with that. And the second thing is I think they already have a stairwell on that property, and what they're doing right now is they're trying to maybe sell the lot next to them, and then, or that is their lot, and then change that stairwell and put a new stairwell on the other side. But currently, they have a stairwell on that property, right? I've been to the property, and that's what I saw. Yeah.
Sir, Mike, did you have your hand up, Mike? You go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I struggle with this one a little bit. As I walk along the waterfront, I'm certainly don't want this to come across a waterfront property where they've built a shed or a fence that's going to it's going to stop my progress across the waterfront. I'm not in favor of encroachments on our waterfront for the most part. The reason I'm going to vote against this motion, though, is I really think that we need to take each encroachment request based on its own merits. I drove along North Shore Park Road, and between North Shore Park and this property in question, there are 10 sets of stairs from other property owners that have stairs down to North Shore Road, and I'm not convinced this is an unfair request. I don't like what the neighbors did in the past either. I like the fact that they fixed and re-landscaped, so I think they've made some good decisions since they made the bad decision. But I'm just thinking that this is a cottage with waterfront view. It's not right on the waterfront. It's across the road from the waterfront, and I see those 10 sets of stairs that are already existing. They've been grandfathered, and I think it's not an unfair request, so I'm going to be voting against the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber. So sorry, I'll get to you, Cheryl. I apologize there.
Thank you. In the absence of knowing what the property lines are on the other properties, it's difficult to know if what's there is on public or private land, because there might be variances to where the property lines are. But what I wanted to say was, at planning, for many, many, many years, when there has been opportunities to remove encroachments from properties, we've done that. We've made them conditions of rebuilds. We've made them conditions of additions to properties. We've made them conditions of all kinds of things. So, and we've survived OMB challenges with requiring people to remove things that are on public property. So I'm in favor of us continuing along the lines of protecting public property and not enabling encroachments. And again, we've survived OMB challenges for decisions we've made in the past where we've required that people remove things. And I see this as not unlike those. But I understand about the other properties that have situations there that go back a bit of time. It would be interesting to just see where the property lines are. Maybe some of them are wholly on private property, but this is something that we have been addressing for lots of years. And I would see a shift being a pretty dramatic shift from some previous decisions that have been made in the community. Thank you.
I'll get to Councillor Grace, and I'm going to, Len, I know there was a question from Johnny about that safety issue, and I'll get you afterwards if you want to get some ideas on it, but I'm going to Councillor Grace right now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I probably have something that Len could maybe clarify as well, because I have a question and a concern about liability also, because we're between a rock and a hard place in a way, because, if we don't do anything about it and somebody's skidding, running down the hill, and they don't have a stairwell there to help them go down more safely on our property, I'm sure we face some liability. Likewise, if we permit and actually endorse a stairwell going down that somebody could also trip on, there's another perhaps that leaves us open to more liability. And I don't know, Len, if that's something you can address when you're answering John's question, but that's a concern for me. Thanks.
You want to speak, Len?
As for John's concern, back to the beginning, the existing stairwell is on the lot that they severed. It's not on the actual lot that they still own. Okay. If we go back to the issue of safety, the stairwell that they're proposing is ending approximately the same location as offset from the road as the existing one, which is in close proximity to the edge of the road. So one way or another, it could be a liability.
A pretty good discussion. I'm the only one other than Don, unless if you want to speak to it, Don, go by me. But this is about the third time I think it's been here in one form or another, and each time our staff have said we think it's a bad idea, and I think it's important that we support our staff. They look at these are the people that deal with these things on a daily issue, whether it's snow plowing or cutting grass. And I think it's always a good a position to protect the public interest in our property everywhere we get the opportunity, almost everywhere. And I don't say that's not, there isn't occasions when we would allow encroachments for some very compelling reasons, but in my mind, this is not one, and I wouldn't support it. So I have a motion here, and I'll read it, and it's been moved by Councillor Minaj and seconded by Councillor Myatt, that requests for encroachment agreement on North Shore Road adjacent to 53 Fenton Drive is approved for successful completion between staff and Mr. and Mrs. Roberts. Okay? That's how I read this. Request for encroachment agreement on North Shore Road adjacent to 53. So I think adjacent to 53 Fenton Drive is approved for successful completion between staff and Mr. and Mrs. Roberts.
Do I have the address wrong, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I mean, is it an agreement that we're asking for? I mean, I guess we'd have to follow our policy on this because we would need an agreement.
Well, I was under duress and under pressure, and I wanted to either vote this down, which meant that they could have an encroachment, and now I've tried to ask that the encroachment be approved in discussion with staff. I'm not saying staff can't work this one out. I'm just saying that we should approve it with their discussion.
So there might be just a word error here. Is approved pending successful completion between staff and Mr. and Mrs. Roberts?
Well, the expectation is that there will be successful conclusion, not that there might be. There will be a successful conclusion to this encroachment, and staff will dictate how that successful conclusion will come about. So if I wrote North Shore Road adjacent to 53 Fenton Drive, that's the subject that's in the staff report.
I think we're kind of clear on this. Kind of clear. You got one more comment?
I just asked my colleague, Councillor Minaj, if we could just ask staff to negotiate. If the direction is to ask them to negotiate an encroachment agreement, can we just be as simple as that, to direct staff to negotiate an encroachment agreement with these proponents? Would that be possible for the mover and seconder?
Mr. Mayor, the Deputy Mayor is concise and accurate to the point, and I agree. Thank you.
Motion is that staff be directed to negotiate an encroachment agreement with the owners of 53 Fenton Drive, North Shore Road. Okay, ready for the question? I think we've all spoke to it once. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
you, Mr. Mayor. Just one last thing. With regards to the question that seems to be at the crux of this, which is the liability issue, the town owns numerous pieces of property, waterfront, beachfront, parks, all over the place, and we always stand the liability that somebody's going to trip and break an ankle or break a hip or something, and take the town to task for the fitness of that piece of property. And this one is no different. And you don't have to look very far to find areas where encroachments similar or maybe even less adequate than what's being proposed here are in place. Look at Scubby's Point, for instance. There's a bunch of old railway ties that are jammed into the dirt that people use all the time to access that area. There's just down the road from what's being proposed here, somebody has built a set of stairs on the other side of the road, cement and stone stairs down to the waterway, and they even put a no trespassing sign on there on town property, and that has survived the test of bylaw inspection. And those are used, and presumably they're overlooked because it's safer to walk down a set of cobbled together stairs than it is to clamber down the rocks. So I think, you can get mired down in the question of liability, and everybody likes to be able to put on their lawyer's hat and think from a litigation point of view to the point where you can't do anything. And I think we need to really just keep that in mind, that what's being proposed here is in any way, shape, or form going to make this access from their property to the road in the back so they can go to the trail safer than it currently is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So back to the question. The question is that we direct staff to negotiate an encroachment agreement with the owners of 53 Fenton Drive North Shore Road. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That fails. Back to our agenda. The next item on the agenda is Environmental Services and Transportation Staff Report. It has to do with the Emma Street Capital Project, and our Director of Public Works, Len Perdue, will present. Sure, that's right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Emma Street Sanitary Replacement Project includes sanitary sewer service replacement, resurfacing, and minor sidewalk repairs on Emma Street from Goddard Street to Bricker, sanitary sewer service replacement and resurfacing on Emma Street from Bricker to Hilker, and minor pavement improvements to the parking lot at the front of the fire hall on Emma Street. All affected streets will be closed in certain areas as the construction process is ongoing. A traffic management plan is prepared to deal with emergency access to and from the fire hall while the work is undertaken. Staff will review the opportunity to add a sidewalk from Bricker Street to Hilker Street as part of the project using other funding sources. Preliminary pre-construction notices have been sent out to the residents, and further notices will be delivered prior to construction. The project will be scheduled to not conflict with Pumpkin Fest and is scheduled to be completed around the end of October. The town received 5 tenders for this project. Keith Snyder Construction in the amount of $169,451.50. Ackert Construction in the amount of $173,571.53. Doug Walsh Construction in the amount of $174,209.99. Bridge Excavating in the amount of $214,754.50. Cedarwell Excavating in the amount of $220,006.60. 2016 capital budget allocation for this project is $200,000. The project costs are within the budget allocation.
Thank you, Len. So the recommendation is that the Keith Snyder Construction be awarded the contract for Emma Street, Goddard Street, and Hilker Street Sanitary Replacement Project, tender number 2016 6410-5600 in the amount of $169,451.50 plus applicable HST, and that the Mayor and Clerk be authorized to sign the necessary tender documents. Questions or comments? Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. Through you to the Acting Director of Public Works. Your comment about the sidewalk extension from Bricker down to Hilker, I would just encourage you to do whatever you can do to try and make that happen, because it would be another sidewalk linkage that's getting closer to the rail trail, and all of that's good for the pedestrian linkages in town. So thanks for adding that in there, and hopefully you can find the money.
Councillor Minaj.
The topic, Mr. Mayor, thank you. My question is about the Emma Street sidewalk. It's currently a 4-foot wide sidewalk, and we're going to move it to the new standard, or we're going to replace it or leave it at the same as it is today?
In the areas where we're installing new sidewalk, the sidewalk will be placed at the 5-foot width. In the section of Goderich to Bricker, where there's existing 4-foot sidewalk, we'll only be repairing it as still a 4-foot sidewalk.
Follow up, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so this is interesting, and this also happened on Elgin Street when we did Elgin Street last year. And what we're doing is we're inside the downtown beautification areas, and what we're, in my opinion, we're not going the full mile here. We should be replacing those, fully replacing a full new sidewalk to the full new standard in these locations that are 1 block away from our downtown core. And so I would like us to either review this, ask staff to review this. I know it'll cost more money, but I think it's an important next step. And we didn't do it on Elgin Street, and I believe we should have done it on Elgin Street. So I'm asking if you can support that, Mr. Mayor.
I think it might be appropriate to come back with a price, perhaps, at some point, the difference, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's not in this recommendation, Neil, so, you know. So I think that's probably what we'll do. And we can have that discussion probably at the next, if you can get us.
Yes, I can bring it out to the next meeting.
Okay. And we can find out what it would cost, and then see whether we've got any money in the budget for it. Or we want to make money in the budget for it. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So the next item on the agenda is amendment to the zoning bylaw, and I guess this has been, we deferred this for 2 weeks, and Bart, if you just want to summarize it again, and we'll get our director or manager of development services will get us started.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the March 29th Committee of the Whole meeting, the amending zoning bylaw, as recommended by the Saugeen Shores Planning Advisory Committee, was deferred until April 11th Committee of the Whole meeting. Consultation process for the amending zoning bylaw started in March of 2015. Staff undertook consultation process that solicited input from over 30 interested parties, which included individuals, builders, developers, committees, associations, government agencies, and local utilities. The Planning Advisory Committee met on 8 separate occasions to address zoning amendments. Staff held 3 open houses in addition to the 1 statutory public meeting. Town hired Jim Diamond of MHBC Planning to provide expert planning advice and to provide assistance to the town staff and Planning Advisory Committee in addressing the following issues. 1, secondary dwelling units. 2, garages and driveways. 3, home occupations and home industries. 4, comments to the Southampton Residential Association. The amended zoning bylaw was recommended for approval by the Planning Advisory Committee this past March 17th. Staff have already received additional comments from homeowners, builders, developers who are waiting until council approves the amended zoning bylaw for proceeding with their development projects. Town Clerk Linda White has shared all written documents submitted since the last Committee of the Whole meeting for Council's review. Thank you.
Thanks, Bart. So I guess, let me see here. Here, I got it. Have a little like. The recommendation is that Council consider passing the attached amendment to the comprehensive zoning bylaw. Comments, questions? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually have 3 specific matters that I hope will allow me to make some motions for some amendments. The first two are actually referring to our commercial cores. In the last couple of years, we've spent a lot of community effort, expense, ensuring that our downtown commercial cores are vibrant and successful as much as they can be. We've been supporting such initiatives with our Downtown Revitalization Committee, the Southampton Streetscape Plan, the Farmers Market in Port Elgin, the Spruce the Bruce campaign that the county is providing, and organizations like our two BIAs, the Chamber of Commerce, our business owners and community volunteers are working very hard to improve the vitality of our downtowns. Our town's official plan speaks to this with these objectives, that we enhance the character, identity, uniqueness, and awareness of the two core areas of Port Elgin and Southampton, and to maintain the role of core areas as community gathering places and commercial and social focal points for the settlement areas and the surrounding farm communities. I have two motions that I'd like to propose with regard to this issue, because I believe that they will support and strengthen our downtowns and show consistency with our official plans. The first is to direct staff to prepare appropriate revisions to try to focus financial institutions in our commercial cores. Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure I've got something written out on this, but would you like me to proceed and talk about my rationale for this, or?
Okay, I think if it's a motion like that, I think we want to be very clear. Everybody wants to be very clear on what we're going to be asked to vote on. So I think you need to, if you have it written, it would certainly help us here, and I'll read that, and then you can speak to it. Okay, we'll get this. I guess this will be one amendment to the main recommendation here, which we'll get to the bylaw. And I don't want to get too hung up on this. I think we can get it to the bylaw. It'll be back to us before council in 2 weeks, I suspect. Barring something. So sorry for that.
The changes are not substantial.
Yes, and I think one of the things that I think I will try to be clear about, or what we'll need to do is, during that, I mean, depending on the motions, but I think we need to go back to staff to see that they're not substantial enough that they don't warrant another opportunity for the public in general to have an input on that. Does that mean another public meeting or that type of thing? Go on, Cheryl.
Okay. Would you like me to?
Okay, so I'll read this. Sorry.
Okay.
I'll read this, and then we'll deal with this one. I think this is probably the way you want to deal with it, these amendments. We'll deal with them individually, and then we'll go back to the main one. So it's been moved by Councillor Grace and seconded by Councillor Minaj to direct staff to prepare appropriate revisions that would be in line with the town's official plan and thereby support the downtown area by focusing financial institutions in our commercial cores. Okay? That's okay. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One method of strengthening our downtowns is to keep uses that draw people into our downtowns on a regular basis. Places like our libraries, our banks, our post offices. And when people come in to visit the bank or pick up their mail, they're more likely to stick around and shop in our core commercial businesses since they're already downtown. If our post offices, banks, and libraries migrate to our highway commercial zones, I fear for the vitality of our core commercial areas because those types of uses would be then more likely to be scattered onto our highway commercial zones. Our official plan speaks to this by encouraging highway commercial developments that do not adversely affect commercial activities in the commercial core designation. And keeping these uses in our core commercial areas also encourages people who reside close by to bike and walk downtown, which is another objective in our official plan. One of the issues, this issue was actually addressed by Jim Diamond, who is the planning consultant for the town. He wrote a report that was submitted, a memo of December 10th, 2015. And he suggested that the municipality could consider deleting the provision for a financial establishment in the highway commercial area. We possibly could do that just for Southampton, because there are several financial establishments in the downtown area of Port Elgin, as well as the one beside the Giant Tiger to the south end. However, if my fellow councillors want to go beyond Southampton, we could do the same thing for Port Elgin, which would allow existing uses to be recognized and permitted, so that bank down in the south end of Port Elgin would be allowed, but new financial establishments would be focused in the downtown area. And this would thereby, I believe, reinforce the vibrancy of our downtown cores of both Port Elgin and Southampton. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess for clarity, what came to my mind, so this would, you really would, I guess how this would operate, you would say that they would only be allowed in our downtown cores and not in highway commercial. I think that's but you
with
shouldn't.
With the exception of the existing,
well, they would be,
existing use.
They'd be legal non-conforming now. Okay, so any other comments to this particular motion? We'll deal with this one and then go ahead, Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to respectfully disagree with my friend, Councillor Grace. I think that if you're going to encourage vibrancy, which I agree is the goal that we ought to have, then the last thing you want to do is fossilize the existing uses that are in place, whatever they are, or demand or place regulations, government regulations on what uses ought to exist in one location or another. The best thing you can do is encourage entrepreneurial dynamism, encourage new uses, look to encourage people to try to do new things that we haven't even imagined might be possible yet in our downtown core areas. In fact, the things that people want or may want in the future out of their downtowns could be very different than what we expect today. I mean, banks, for example, may not even exist in very many years, bricks and mortar banks, right? The way people are doing transactions of every nature are changing. And so therefore, the use of a downtown core is also going to have to change. I mean, the way people shop, we're dealing with the market, and whatever we do here, whatever choices we make or restrictions we try to put in place, the market will get past us. The market will move beyond us, and we can't control it, and oughtn't try, I don't think. So my view is, I agree with you. I agree with your basic desire to encourage dynamism, something that I've pushed for a long time in downtowns. I guess I just disagree with the method of how we get there. I think that finding ways to encourage people to try new things in the downtown cores and to potentially accommodate a changing group of uses for those buildings down there is the way to do that. And I think the best way to get there is for us to place as few restrictions as possible on what ought to or ought not to be located in those locations. So for those reasons, I can't support the resolution, though I do support the overall direction of the councillor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We'll go here first. Councillor Rich.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm partially in agreement with the Deputy Mayor. See, one of the things that I see, so say, for example, there's a Royal Bank. We don't have a Royal Bank in the area. Say they wanted to move to the area. If we put this kind of restriction in place, now have a look at the downtown and try and think of where they're going to go, right? And then so they say, well, it doesn't really work for us in the downtown. We'd sooner be out at out by the Canadian Tire, for example, or wherever they would like to be. And then they decide not to come here. So then instead of people coming here to use the Royal Bank and maybe stopping at the Canadian Tire and the Walmart and then maybe trickling through the downtown, then we don't have a Royal Bank here at all. And instead they go to Paisley. Do you see that kind of perspective, how that could actually have an unintended effect?
I do.
I think I'll go first with you, Neil. Councillor Minaj and then the Vice Deputy.
I think this is amazing. This is the essence of what we're here for. This is exactly it. And we're being asked by the Southampton residents, many of them, to protect their distinct heritage, their downtown. If we want to allow strip mall development, which we did in Port Elgin, and we said We'll put a bank beside a liquor store, beside a grocery store. When that mall plaza originally opened, it had a Zehrs in it, and it had the liquor store. It was a one-stop shopping for everybody that was going to live in the immediate vicinity, so they could walk to it all. It made perfectly good sense at the time to move a bank out there. Today, the Southampton residents are saying no, and for that reason, I support this motion. Thank you.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too am supportive. This is not unlike other things that we do where we suggest permitted uses in various zoning areas. And downtown isn't really the correct terminology. It's commercial core. So it's a slightly bigger area than just the main street in both places. But we restrict uses, we permit uses. This is not unlike a lot of other things that are already in the zoning bylaw. So, and if the Royal Bank wanted to come, and full disclosure, Royal Bank customer, Kincardine, not Paisley, they would be able to apply for a zoning change if, you know, they were not finding what they needed in the downtown core. But there are a number of other types of businesses that we restrict in some areas or we permit in some areas. This is not unlike what's already in the zoning bylaws in a lot of ways. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
There's no others, then is everybody clear what I'm going to call the question on this amendment. Is everybody clear on what we're voting on? All in favor? Opposed? It's defeated.
Okay, thank you.
What's your next one, sure?
Very good. Okay, well, my second motion is actually, and I guess I need another sheet. I'm out of 2 more. My second motion is similar, and in this case, I go back to my argument about trying to preserve the vitality of our downtown and commercial core areas, but I guess I would say more than just our downtown areas. And in this case, I want to focus on specified public and institutional uses, which would include assembly halls, post offices, libraries, museums. In our existing bylaw, we have section 3.31, which allows public uses to be located in any zone. And no amendment has been put before us to change this. Once again, what I have a concern about our post office migrating out of the downtown core. Our post office, at least in Southampton, and I think probably in Port Elgin as well, is an important social meeting place in our town. I know some people have spoken to me when I've asked them their opinion about this. They've said, we don't have the power to control where the post office goes. It's a federal power. And that's true. Of course, the federal government, federal power takes precedence, and they can always build their own buildings. But I think generally, if you think about the way that the post office is operating, especially in smaller communities, they're not building their own buildings. They're going into the backs of large drugstores and into a smaller office in a strip mall along the highway, and renting space in a privately owned building somewhere. So we don't have control over where they choose to locate, but we do have control by trying to shape our permitted uses and to try and preserve our public uses being centered and focused in the downtown. And so for that reason, I would like to put forward a motion, and I haven't written this out yet, but I'll state it so that people could think about it, and I'll try and write it as quickly as possible. So I'd like a revision to section 3. To direct staff to revise section 3.31 of the existing zoning bylaw listing as exceptions such public uses as assembly hall, library, and post office to be specified in core commercial zones to retain these important public uses in our downtown areas. And currently, Section 3.31 basically allows public uses to be located in any zone. So I'll just quickly write that out. If that's appropriate, I don't know.
Yeah, I think if you can make it as clear as you can. I'm a little confused, to be honest.
Okay, sorry.
Because zoning bylaws are often confusing, I can assure you.
I think, Mr. Mayor, if this is a resolution on assembly halls and core commercial areas, I need to declare a pecuniary interest, as I'm the owner of an assembly hall in the core commercial area of the town of Port Elgin.
But it's not a publicly owned. These are public uses. Okay.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I'm a little conflicted over this one because if however it gets worded, if it was in place, it would mean that a building like this wouldn't be possible because there's an assembly hall upstairs. So I understand the intent and I agree with that. I'm just I don't see how this is doable. And I would certainly like to see the post office in particular remain in the way it is in both downtowns. But again, it's going to be out of our control at some point. So I just don't know if this is a valid one because it would stop us from lots of public construction.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, staff would be concerned about the language specifically that would restrict the opportunity, for example, for other municipal infrastructure that is very vital to conducting its day-to-day operations. And the Vice Deputy Mayor has a point. I don't believe this building would be here without a rezoning, and I'm not sure that is something that might have been contemplated when we thought about this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's the intent, though. It's the only chance we get to try and place any control at all is to deal with zoning and planning in this manner. And actually, I'd like to correct the thinking here. We already lost the Port Elgin post office. It was fragmented back in the 80s, and the majority of Port Elginites do not go to the main post office. So we had a chance then to try and stop them, and we didn't, and we allowed it to take place because the federal government was overbearing and overpowering. So this is a chance at least to put some controls in place. And you said it right, Mr. Mayor. You said, I believe you said it, or maybe it was the Deputy Mayor, that we have a chance to say no on the surface and allow people to apply for a zoning amendment. That would include ourselves. So if we put this in place, if Cheryl puts this in place, Councillor Grace, sorry, then clearly, and we decided that we wanted to expand office structure here, we could go through the process and say it might still be the right decision. This is a chance, though, to put some controls up front that say it is our belief that we ought to be investing in our downtowns, that they are in trouble, and this is one way to do it.
I didn't say that, Neil. It wasn't me that you're quoting. I don't know, I can assure you, because I would not be in favor of saying one thing, hoping that maybe sometime down the road we could do something different. I think you need to be, that to me is not being real transparent about it. One other comment I would say, I think I need to be very clear about this because, potentially we're talking about building a multi-million-dollar police station, and if the only option is in the downtown core, it will drive up the costs significantly, even if we can even find a spot. So, I think we need to be very clear about what we're trying to do here. The second thing is, to be quite honest, we can talk all we want about what the post office can or can't do or what we can try and do, but I can assure you they will do. They are federally regulated and can and will do what they want. perhaps you're much more effective of mobilizing the community as a whole in some type of a, correspondence or making your feelings known than trying to do it through a regulatory process, because it doesn't apply anyway. It doesn't apply to a federal body. But I'm sorry, I don't want to speak too much. I certainly want to hear the motion so that we can get it on the floor and everybody can speak to it.
Okay, I've pared it down a little bit, maybe. Hopefully this will be better. A motion to direct staff to prepare an amendment to include exceptions for the following public uses: libraries and post offices, in section 3.31, to be retained in our core commercial zones, because section 3.31 says they can be in any zone.
And I think in fairness to the deputy mayor, then that does not really. I don't think he can make his own decision, but I don't think that puts you in a conflict. So I think, thanks for reading that out, Cheryl. It makes it a little more easier for us all. So it's been moved by Councillor Grace and seconded by Councillor Minaj that a motion to direct staff to prepare an amendment to include exceptions for the following public uses: libraries and post offices, in section 3.31 to be retained in our core commercial zones. Okay. Everybody clear on that? So, okay, Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
I just want a real clarification, since I didn't exactly hear the whole conversation. What that effectively does is restrict libraries and post offices to the core commercial areas of the municipality.
Okay, Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Again, I'm really conflicted about this one, because the idea of the library in Southampton leaving downtown is hard to imagine, but if the library went to the school, then that's in conflict, because the school, GC Houston, is not in the core. The line stops there. So, I just don't see this as doable. I think there's a different way to encourage those two particular institutions to be in the appropriate parts of the community. I don't think it needs to be this way. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to this? If not, then I'll call the question. So is everybody clear that the motion? Does anybody want me to read it again? No? Would you like to read it again? Okay. It's been moved by Councillor Grace and seconded by Councillor Minaj. A motion to direct staff to prepare an amendment to include exceptions for the following public uses. Excuse me. Libraries and post offices in section 3.31 to be retained in our core commercial zones. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So now we'll go back to the main recommendation, was that we can... Oops. Oh, you have one more?
My last proposed motion has to do with the proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw on sections 3.11b and 3.12b, which refers to our home industry and home occupation sections. Essentially, I believe that the proposed amendments are in conflict with our town's official plan and also with the Bruce County official plan. So I have a motion to direct staff to investigate whether that's actually true or not, and I can explain why I feel that way.
Okay, I think then, have you got it written or no?
Almost.
Okay, and then we'll get it on the floor so we can discuss it. So then it's been moved by Councillor Grace and seconded by Councillor Minaj. The council directs staff to investigate whether proposed amendments of section 3.11B and 3.12B of the existing zoning bylaw comply with the Bruce County and the Town of Saugeen Shores plans, and the council directs staff to present council with the proposed revised amendments which comply with the Bruce County and Town of Saugeen Shores official plans. So, yeah, okay, for clarity.
Sorry, for clarity, when you refer to the existing zoning bylaw, is that the bylaw in effect or the bylaw that is currently being proposed as an amendment bylaw?
I think the wording I meant to say was that the proposed amendments to the existing bylaw.
The bylaw that's included in their package of information for this agenda.
The amendments are what's in the packet.
Yes.
Yeah, so I believe that the amendments are not in compliance with the plans. Thank you.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe what the amendment, what the result of it would basically be to lift out the home occupation and home industry section and just have them come slightly later. I think that's the idea behind the amendment, knowing the sections that are quoted there. There is two official plans involved in that part. Our own official plan, the Saugeen Shores official plan, relates to settlement areas, so that picks up on home occupations. Home industries are come into play in the area outside the settlement zone, which is the Bruce County official plan. And the Bruce County official plan does have specific sorts of things there, and it does very specifically say that, you know, there's a place for our voice to be heard in that. So this is one place where we can actually say what's permitted and what's not permitted. So it's I think that there is some potential conflicts there, but there's some opportunity too. And certainly if we're trying to encourage industry and business and commercial activity and professional offices to locate in an appropriate place, this is the chance that we have to make that clear in the zoning bylaw. And I think that Councillor Grace's amendment is worthy of our consideration, and it wouldn't necessarily slow down everything else getting considered tonight, but it would basically just lift out a section or two sections that have to do with home occupations and home industry, and let us take a really close look at making sure that, you know, we've got both our official plan and the county's official plan taken into account, and that if we're trying to strengthen commercial core activity and ensure that industry and activity or businesses end up in the right place, this is our chance to do that. So I will be supporting what Councillor Minaj and Councillor Grace have put before us. Thank you.
I do think we need clarification. So section 3.11 refers to home occupations. Oh, sorry, home industries. 3.11b reads, such home industry shall only be located in a part of a dwelling or an accessory building located on a lot on which a single dwelling is in existence. Section 3.12b reads, and it's in reference to a home occupation, so section 3.12b reads, only one home occupation shall be permitted in a dwelling unit.
Can I speak to my concerns?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So our current existing bylaw without the proposed amendments for home industries, which is, as the Vice Deputy Mayor said, outside of the settlement area, Our current regulations require that it be operated by a person residing on the lot, and that it not employ more than 2 persons who do not reside in the dwelling. These are my concerns. These sections talking about the actual nature of home. And for the home occupation section, which is governed by the town official plan, the town official plan, or the zoning bylaw says that currently it's to be carried out by a resident of the unit, and at no time shall any home occupation employ more than 2 persons not residing within the dwelling unit to which such home occupation is accessory. So I went back and looked at what the official plans say. Because the Bruce County official plan refers to home industry outside the settlement area, it defines home industries right now as small-scale industrial businesses carried out as secondary uses to the main permitted use, the owner-operator's principal residence. And the town of Saugeen Shores says the following, its official plan says the following about home occupations, which are those located in the settlement areas of our town, Southampton and Port Elgin. The town of Saugeen Shores official plan, I can cite the section if you want it, says the home occupation must be operated by a person residing in the home. The zoning bylaw will restrict the number of outside employees permitted in conjunction with the home occupation. So to sort of sum up, the proposed amendments before us remove the requirement that the owner and operator reside in the home. That is not consistent with either the county plan or the town plan, and it also, both of them, remove the limit on the number of employees, which is in conflict with our town's official plan for home occupations. What the amendments attempt to do is to regulate the scope of the number of employees through regulating commercial vehicles, the number of commercial vehicles, the number of parking spaces. So, for instance, the proposed amendments limit the number of commercial vehicles in home industries, those are the ones out in the farm area, to 3, and home industry-related parking spaces to 2. And because of conflicts with our, I believe that there are conflicts with our governing official plans. I'd like staff to look at that. But I think it's also troublesome to try to tie the number of employees, which our amendments are silent on, to driving practices. Without a limit on the number of employees, it's possible that somebody could have employees could be carpooling. You could have an unlimited number of workers because there's nothing in our proposed amendments that speak to that. And without a stated requirement, which we've taken out, that an owner and operator live in the lot's residence, why are we calling these definitions home at all? There's an old adage which says a hard case shouldn't be used to make law. And in other words, what that means to me is that an exceptional case shouldn't be used as the basis for creating a generalized law. By approving these amendments, we'd be including permanent changes in our zoning bylaw to accommodate an exceptional case, which the Planning Advisory Committee has wrestled with over the last months. That case has been adjudicated, the variance has been permitted. I'm asking us not to compound this situation by amending our home industry and home occupation sections to make these changes permanent and to create a precedent which allows all such industries to expand their employee number without limit. We have light industrial and industrial zones in our town to appropriately accommodate larger businesses with more employees, and if further exceptional situations arise within a home industry or home occupation situation, business owners always have the opportunity to petition for a variance that meets their needs. Thank you.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The councillor makes some good points. I wonder, just one point of clarification perhaps staff could address. the definition of home industry and home occupation require that in both cases that the location be occupied by the proprietor. Does that deal with the councillor's concern about removing the requirement that the proprietor live in the residence, or is that, or the definition doesn't govern the
I would ask staff to clarify. I suspect that was an effort to address her concern in just a different word. I suspect that, in my mind, I think the proprietor, if he has to reside there, then he has to be the owner. I don't know. I think you raised some good questions, and I think this is general enough that we can have staff go back and look at this. I do know the Planning Advisory Committee have struggled with this and put a lot of effort into it. I perhaps, would you like to speak to it at all, Jay, or?
Only if council has or county councilor has a particular question, I can try to answer. But if you want to discuss it,
Sorry, I think then this motion really directs them to go back and say, do you believe it's in conformity with the two official plans? And if not, then come up with a solution for us. And I think that's really what you're trying to get at, Councillor Grace?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I think that's pretty clear, and we can direct staff to come back with that, a resolution of that. And I think we give them an opportunity again to review again what the Planning Advisory Committee went through to get to this point, because I know they struggled with this, with trying to come up with a suitable solution that addressed what they heard. So then I'll call the question on this amendment then. Is everybody clear on what we're voting for there? If I got you confused? We're really just directing staff to go back and look and see if that home occupation section is in conformity with the two plans. Okay? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So now, we'll go back to the main question, and then I think, and I'll read that one, that council consider passing the attached amendments as amendment, I guess we'll say as amendment to the comprehensive zoning bylaw. Any further questions on that? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So we have one communication or petition for the Committee of the Whole action, and it's from the Grey Highlands, and it's a resolution on the health effects of wind turbines. It's there. It's really directing or asking for support that direct the Grey Highlands Council to engage the Grey Bruce Public Health to look at these issues again, and now take direction from committee.
I would move to support, Mr. Mayor. I think that having the health unit look at, if the health unit is willing to look at the health effects of wind turbines. We have a case in our community where a number of individuals believe that they're suffering health effects from a single wind turbine, and so I think if the health unit is willing to do that study, it would be worthwhile, and certainly in concert with our recent motions on the same subject. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So you want to speak to it, Mike? Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's from. I'm not going to speak to it. I think we can let the health unit reply. Any further questions to it? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So we have, I guess, 7 items there for Committee of the Whole's information. Okay, I'll start there. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau, we'll get there.
I think it's. It is concerning. It was raised before the meeting about the Julie Nolan OMB decision and some of the inaccuracies in the document referencing the County of Huron. I wonder if would it be at all. I mean, it is a little odd. It would be at all worthwhile for us to advise at least the OMB, or have we advised the OMB that there are these factual errors in a judgment by the tribunal? I think we ought to at least advise them of that. At least advise them of that fact and express our concern about it.
I think we can probably ask staff to point those errors out with a letter. That's fine. Okay. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber, and then we'll get to you.
Continuing along on the OMB front, item number 4 is our next OMB hearing. I'm just curious to know, the town did not defend the planning decision of the Planning Advisory Committee with the first one. So I'm just curious to know, will the town be defending the position of the Planning Advisory Committee on this one? And if not, as a member of the Planning Advisory Committee who was involved with this, I would appreciate knowing how I can somehow put my name down there as a witness to go and represent the interests of what went on at the meeting. Because I noticed, I sat through the last one, and I noticed that there was a bit of just a disconnect with us not being represented. So I'm just curious, are we planning to defend PAC on that one? Or if not, how do people become witnesses to an OMB hearing? Because I'm assuming it will be held here again.
This particular one are different than the last one, and staff will have a report with respect to this one at the next meeting. We're in discussion with the county.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one, going back to the OMB report on the Dallside Road case, could I also request that staff check into the accuracy of point 14? I believe there may be an error in what the author of the report, the board member, has reported about the zoning for highway commercial. Thank you.
Sure, we can do that. Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. The notice of public information redevelopment charges, why is it in the afternoon? Is there better attendance, public input in the afternoon rather than an early evening meeting?
I can't answer that. I don't know. I think they just we will have a public meeting again in council chambers in the evening when the final report gets here. But this is really just for him. It's a statutory meeting, though. Can you speak to it, Jay?
Yes, it's not a statutory meeting where you've had good success with having meetings at various times throughout the day. So having one in the midday, 2 o'clock, is good because our statutory meeting will be an evening session. We can get people from different walks of society come to different sessions to get their information. 2 o'clock versus 3, there was no magic there. It was the
So the afternoon meeting, but when it comes to council, that's an evening meeting, and then it's for approval. There won't be much discussion at that point, will there?
There'll be 2 more sessions for council. There'll be the statutory public meeting, at which they will not make a decision, and then there'll be a time for committee of the whole discussion after that statutory public meeting. So there'll be 2 more opportunities for input directly into the process, and then council consideration of the bylaw.
Okay. If there's nothing else, we'll take a motion to adjourn. Councillor Madison and Deputy Mayor Charbonneau. All in favor? We're adjourned until 9 p.m.